Hey y'all, my name is Dory and I'm the Black Medical Anthropologist. Today's video is going to be a get ready with me and I'll be discussing the anti-Black experiences that I had in medical school. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I'll be back after this sponsor. I'm the sponsor, it's me! I don't know if you've ever noticed, but in my videos, I typically have a candle burning in the background. Today's video is sponsored by Jay's Smell Goods, my candle company. I make individualized coconut blend candles in repurposed vessels. On June 4th, I'll be a candle vendor at the event Plant Your Seed in Raleigh, North Carolina. At this event, you can expect food, local vendors like myself, musical performances, and the opportunity to pot your own plant. I offer 15% off if you bring me a candle vessel. Tickets are linked in the description box down below. Now let's get into the video. I chose the school that I decided to go to because of how many Black people it had. I had looked at the stats and decided that I for sure wanted to go to a school that had a good amount of Black people in it. When I got to my school, I felt like, yes, there were more Black people, yes, there were more Hispanic people, but there still was a lack of representation of Black American people, especially considering the population of patients that we were treating in the hospital, which are majority Black. I would say more than likely majority Black American specifically, which is what I identify with. I obviously want everybody to be at the table, but for me, I just felt like it didn't make sense considering the population that we were treating. It was made even more apparent that there weren't that many Black Americans when I received a scholarship. Whoop whoop. I went to the office to sign some paperwork and this white woman was asking me questions about, oh, where are you from? And I was like, oh, I'm from North Carolina. My family is from Memphis in Georgia. And she was like, no, where are you from? And I'm like, girl, have you heard of slavery? I was just kind of thrown off because I was like, I don't understand what else she wants from me. But it also was kind of telling to me that she doesn't encounter a lot of Black Americans, because I don't think that I would have been having that interaction if she had. Me being one of the few Black Americans also led to me oftentimes being consulted during times of adversity, or during times where racism was heightened. It was oftentimes asked to sit in groups and things, and it was usually by friends. And I understood that it was coming from a good place, but it was also exhausting because, one, I'm Black American, yes, but I would not say that I have a typical Black American experience relative to this country. And even me saying that is very subjective. I grew up very privileged. I have a wide range of likes and interests that I would say even ostracize me from my own community at times in my life. For me to be the voice for Black Americans, it's better than nothing, but I'm not the most representative of Black Americans. I also had non-Black classmates attempt to touch my hair. Microaggressions that you would expect anywhere, honestly. We're in America. Unfortunately, it's just something that happens. So I was, dealing with microaggressions from classmates. I also was dealing with microaggressions that were systemic. For instance, there were multiple times that my classmates and I would be in class and they would be like, oh, a risk factor for hypertension is being Black. And that's just as far as they would go. And for me and my classmates, we're like, no, it's not only being Black, it's being Black in America. Oftentimes we would call them out on it. We would say, you guys need to expand on this concept just for the information to be the same the next year. We would hear from other classmates in the classes below us that nothing has changed. That was in the classroom, but it was also something that happened in standardized exams. I would oftentimes be doing practice questions, and in the practice question, they would mention the patient being Black, but it wouldn't be relevant. If it was oh, Black people have this genetic disease and we're more likely to have this problem, that's one thing. But it would be times that it was just completely irrelevant, and they would never mention white people. They rarely mentioned other race people. There were a lot of times that I and my other classmates would leave reports. That was in my preclinical years that I was experiencing anti-Blackness. The anti-Blackness that I experienced in my clinical years, I would say, was significantly worse. I felt like the pandemic really brought out the worst parts of medicine. As there's more stress on the system, your biases are even more uninhibited. As a result, I noticed that I would get reported for doing things that other classmates of other ethnicities were doing. I would be hyper criticized for things that were relatively normal for a student. I was also put in positions where I was often consulted as if I were a translator. I have very distinct memories of times that my superior, we call them attendings in medical school, like the doctor that we're working under. I have a lot of memories around those doctors trying to communicate with a Black patient and not understanding what they were saying. And oftentimes what that translated to was them eventually giving up and then looking at me to basically translate what the patient was saying. To me, I speak African American vernacular English. I recognize that it's a different language, but I also recognize that it's not a language that you wouldn't understand if you just tried. To me, it just felt like it was a lack of trying. So I would be in positions where I would be like translating what they said, which isn't my job. I'm here to learn. I'm not here to be a translator. I would say that those were racist experiences and anti-Black experiences that I had to deal with personally. But I think what expedited my burnout was seeing anti-Blackness and racism affect patient care. That to me was like way more traumatizing because I could cope with dealing with microaggressions. I was in therapy, whatever, yada yada. But watching patients die as a result of neglect, likely secondary to bias, is not something that you just get over. It was definitely something that caused me a lot of moral injury. And not only did I witness anti-Blackness, not only did I witness anti-Blackness and racism, I also witnessed a little bit of classism too. I think they all go hand in hand, obviously, but I did want to bring that into the picture as well. For instance, I had this one attending who we went to go see a patient. He was known not to be very cooperative with his physicians. So I had never met the patient before. He wasn't my patient. And basically what happens in medical school is that a medical student goes to go visit the patient, and then we discuss the patient, and then as a group, us and the physician go to visit the patient. We went to his room, and mind you, it's early. We round really, really early. Like, we could be in patients' rooms at like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. So he's asleep. He doesn't really want to talk, as most people wouldn't. Let's be real. Nobody wants to talk to you at 5 o'clock in the morning. I think that part of medicine is just very unrealistic and unfair, to be honest. But anyways, so we go into the room and our physician asks the patient, hey, is it okay if we talk to you? When we go in there, the patient has his sheet over his head. When the physician asks, is it okay if we talk to you? He didn't respond. I think the physician asked him twice, and twice he didn't reply. After he didn't reply, the attending that I was working with, the physician, he decided to rip the sheet off of the patient's head, which I honestly found to be disrespectful. But after the attending did that, he was very obviously upset. And he told the physician, like, no, I don't want to talk right now. Why would you do that? You need to apologize. My attending looked at him in his face and like kind of like stink faced him and then told him, I'm not apologizing. And then went on to start trying to talk about his health plan, like what we were doing for him in the hospital. And the whole time I could just tell that the patient was not listening because he felt disrespected. So he just wasn't listening. He looked like he was ready to go back to bed. After the physician was done explaining to him what we planned to do in his lesson plan, he asked the patient, do you have any questions? Do you have any concerns? The patient was like, no, but I still want you to apologize for tearing the sheet off of my head. My physician was like, well, I'm not doing that, and then stormed out of the room. When we got into the hallway, which is right outside the patient's room, he was like, I can't believe that he was acting like this. Like, do you guys think that I'm in the wrong for that? And literally, like, one by one looked at each of us, like the residents and the medical students, like basically looking for validation from us that he was in the right for acting the way that he acted. And, this is a superior. So some of them nodded their heads. I just was quiet because I was kind of pissed off by the whole encounter. And then the patient had some fast food in his room. After he went one by one asking us like if we think it was okay, he was like, and how did he get that food in his room? He's homeless. This was the same physician that earlier in the day he was telling us about and like laughing about the fact that where he grew up, the homeless people lived underground, like in an old subway system. that was no longer being used. And he joked that that's how he prefers it. Like, he prefers that they live underground so that he doesn't have to see them and deal with them. So those two paired together really turned me off. Like, I was just like, what was that? I actually ended up reporting that situation to my course director, and she herself was like very shocked and alarmed, and it took her a while to even respond to me because she said that she was just processing what I told her. But basically, he just got a talking to. Like, that's what I got from her response, was that she said she was going to talk to him. And to me, it's really scary to think that somebody can have such obvious biases and like still be okay, like, without any kind of actual intervention, be able to treat patients. The next couple stories are very disheartening, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because they stir up a lot of negative emotions for me, but I do think that they're important to share. The first situation that I'm going to talk about was this poor Black man who came in from the psychiatric unit because he had a loss of blood, like his hemoglobin, which is the level which tells us how much blood you have, pretty much. His hemoglobin dropped significantly to the point where he needed some blood transfusions. So we got him on the unit, and he got his blood transfusions, and we did like very like basic tests to try to determine why he was bleeding, like where the bleeding was coming from. Those tests were inconclusive. To me, I felt like that meant that we needed to do more tests. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Instead, my team decided that he belonged on the psychiatric unit and that we needed to get him out as soon as possible. We ended up discharging him despite not finding out why he was bleeding. Surprise, surprise, he ended up back on the floor because he was bleeding again. Like, I don't remember what exactly happened, but they checked his hemoglobin again, and he had a low hemoglobin to the point where he needed to have a transfusion again. So to me, I found that to be disturbing because it was honestly a bit neglectful, and I feel like it was once again driven by biases around potentially his race, but also his mental illness and the perception that he would be a burden to the healthcare team. I also witnessed a situation that was extremely disturbing to me. It was probably one of the most disturbing things that I've seen, and it made me fear having children as a Black woman. I had this one patient who I had talked to her husband prior to her C-section, and he had told me that like she's not English speaking, so like if anything happens and, you know, if something goes awry, like I need to know so that I can be able to communicate with her, or like, you know, at least just have a general idea. We were doing a C-section and she had anesthesia. The anesthesia is supposed to make you, it was an epidural. An epidural is supposed to help you not have pain. But as my attending was cutting into her abdomen, I started to notice her moving. But like when I saw her moving, I also was hearing her say, ouch. I got my attending's attention and I was like, I don't think that her epidural is working. I said it a couple times, but as I'm saying it, he's still cutting through the layers of her abdomen. He's cutting through the skin, he's cutting through the fat, he's cutting through the muscle. And I said multiple times, I don't think that she is properly anesthetized. And finally, he looked annoyed that he had to stop what he was doing, and the anesthesiologist expressed to us that she was going to have to put her under. As this information is being relayed to the team, to the physician who's doing the surgery, it's not necessarily being relayed to the husband. So the husband is rushed out, and we delivered her babies, brought the babies out to see dad, and dad was just extremely scared because he had no idea what was going on. And I found the whole encounter to be disturbing because, one, it showed me that we do not care about Black women's pain yet again. And two, I can't imagine, considering the country that we live in, the high Black maternal mortality rate, what was going through that man's mind. I'm sure he was so worried, especially seeing the children come out before his wife. I'm sure he was terrified that she was dead. And that, like, really, really broke my heart because you're supposed to be having a moment. Ooh. You're supposed to be having a happy moment, and instead you're worried if your wife is alive. It was horrible. I've never seen anything like that before, and it really made me like scared for Black women. Ooh, that got me a little bit emotional, and I'm not gonna go into the details of the last story because the last story gets me even more emotional, if I'm being honest. But to give like just a basic idea of what happened, I witnessed a previously pretty much fully independent older Black man come into the hospital with delirium and end up in 4-point restraints. I went ahead and did my mascara off camera. I'm sure y'all don't want to see me with my mouth hanging wide open. Throughout all of those experiences, I didn't feel my emotions. I oftentimes was not debriefed after these situations happened. I think a lot of the times it wasn't even perceived by others that there was anything wrong with what I saw. And so because I wasn't debriefed, I kind of just figured it wasn't a big deal in the moment. And it wasn't until I injured my leg and had to sit down and really like have time with myself, like just to process everything, that it hit me how horrible all of these situations were. And like, you know, part of me was kind of grateful that I didn't feel those things in real time, because I don't know how I would have been able to move forward, to be honest. We had an office of diversity and inclusion, but I felt like the office was kind of disconnected from us, especially during the pandemic, where like I wasn't as like in past classes, maybe they would go to the Office of Diversity and Inclusion like in person, but like because of the pandemic, I don't even think they were open. So it's like if something happened, like I didn't have the opportunity to just walk up to the office and ask them for insight or like receive support. So I felt like they were very disconnected from us and what we were experiencing. I'm like talking about this serious topic and I'm over here like popping my lips. Anyway, so in the moment, I didn't really feel all that supported, but over time I did go to conferences and I made connections with people who had either similar experiences or experienced hardship in medical school. And I felt like I wasn't as alone and I was able to get some mentorship. I was also consulted by someone in a higher position of power at my school, basically asking me how the higher ups like the deans, etc., should be dealing with these things, how they should support Black students who experience things that are similar to me. And I basically told them that they need to have a list of people per rotation who can be allies for when these things happen. And I say when because I do think that no matter what, they're going to happen. I felt like it was important to have a list of allies to validate our experience and also support us through these things, because that's what I felt like was missing in my experience, was that I was just dealing with it on my own. And it was really easy for me, especially when everybody around me was acting like things were normal. It was easy for me to just assume that it was normal and that like it was in my head and like basically gaslight myself. I also said that we need to have regular safe spaces where we can discuss these instances and problem solve as a community, because I think that that builds connection. I don't know if that needed to be like through the Office of Diversity and Inclusion or if it needed to be a student-led group, but I think that no matter what, it would have been better than nothing. And lastly, I felt like we needed tools to learn how to navigate these things, like things to say, where to report to, people who we know can support us, things of that nature, because I think that, you know, support is great, but solutions are even better. And I don't think that there's a one size fits all solution to when you have a racist encounter, but I think that having at least a couple gems is better than nothing. As an anthropologist, moving forward, I definitely want to do some work with medical students and, you know, showing the narrative of what we experience and going from a more objective perspective of like how we can help the mental health of medical students, because it's not great. Like the amount of medical students who experience mental illness is astronomical, and I think that it's a shame that we haven't done anything about it thus far. That was a rough one, y'all. I'm not gonna lie. Like that was kind of hard for me to explain too, but I hope that you enjoyed this video. And if you have any similar experiences, if you were in medical school, leave a comment below. If you have any questions or, you know, any other comments, I would also love to hear those too. And also, this is my look. This is the finished look. I love this look. I think that it's very summery. So, hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.